6 charges. That's what we're covering today. 6 separate charges that a good number of pensioners in this country are legally entitled to stop paying altogether through ordinary rules already published on gov.uk. Nothing clever, nothing you need a solicitor for, and nothing hidden behind small print designed to trip you up. Stack all 6 together over a year, and you're often looking at several £100, sometimes closer to 1,000, leaving somebody's account for something the law never actually asked them to pay in the first place, usually without them noticing until it's added up over the years. Nobody sends a letter saying you qualify for this. The forms are dense, the wording is dry, and most people simply never sit down and work through them properly, so the exemption just sits there unclaimed. You have to know to ask, and that's exactly what we're fixing in the next few minutes. Here's why this matters beyond the money itself. Every one of these 6 exemptions already exists in law right now, today. As you're watching this, they're not proposals, they're not rumours, they're not something a minister mentioned once in a budget speech and then never followed through on. They're sitting on official pages, written in the kind of language that makes most people's eyes glaze over halfway down the page, which is precisely why so few pensioners ever benefit from them despite qualifying. Missed for 1 year, it's an annoyance. Missed for 10 years, which happens more often than you'd think, particularly with things like council tax discounts that nobody ever revisits once a claim is set up. It can add up to several £1,000s that never needed to leave your account. This isn't about finding a loophole or gaming a system. It's about finally being told what you were owed the whole time and nobody got round to mentioning. And to be clear from the outset, none of what follows involves cancelling a direct debit on a whim or ignoring a bill because you've decided you shouldn't have to pay it. Every single one of these is a genuine published exemption you either qualify for or you don't. And the whole point of the next few minutes is helping you work out honestly which side of that line you're on. Quick note before we carry on, this is general information to help you understand how these rules work, not personal financial or tax advice. Everyone's circumstances differ, so treat this as your starting point. And for anything that touches your own money, check the official guidance directly, or speak to a free service like Citizens Advice or Money Helper. If this is useful so far, really helps the channel reach more people who need it. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I read them all. Before we go through the 6 one by one, it helps to understand the thread running underneath most of them because it changes how you should read this whole video. Some of these exemptions apply simply because of your age. No application needed beyond stating your date of birth honestly when asked. Others apply only if you're receiving a specific benefit, regardless of how old you are, which means turning 70 or even 90 makes no difference at all if the benefit isn't in place alongside it. Mixing those two categories up is exactly how people either miss out on something they're entitled to or wrongly assume they qualify for something they don't and end up with an unwelcome bill months later when someone finally checks. Keep that distinction in your head as we go through them because I'll flag clearly which is which for each one as we get there. The first is national insurance and it's age-based, nothing to do with benefits or income. Once you reach state pension age, you stop paying Class 1 national insurance contributions on your earnings, even if you're still working full-time in exactly the same job you've had for years. Plenty of people carry on working past state pension age, whether that's a few shifts a week stacking shelves or something closer to a full working week in an office. And some of them are still having national insurance deducted from their pay because nobody in the payroll office flagged the change when the birthday came round. Take someone like Margaret, 71, working 3 days a week in a garden centre. If national insurance is still coming off her payslip, that's money that should already be staying in her pocket every single week, and it's worth raising with payroll directly. showing your birth certificate or passport as proof of your date of birth. So there's no argument about it. HMRC can also issue what's called an age exemption certificate if your employer specifically asks for one. And once it's sorted, it stays sorted. There's nothing to renew every year. It's worth checking a recent payslip properly rather than glancing at the total, because national insurance is usually its own separate line. Easy to miss if you're only looking at what actually lands in the bank. The honest catch here is narrow but worth knowing properly. This only covers Class 1 contributions, the ones taken from employment income through PAYE. If you're self-employed past state pension age, the rules around Class 4 contributions work slightly differently, so check that separately if it applies to you, rather than assuming the employment rule automatically carries across to self-employment. Then there's prescriptions, and this one is also purely age-based, with no forms and no waiting. In England, once you turn 60, NHS prescriptions become free. You don't need a prepayment certificate, and you don't need to apply for anything complicated in advance. You simply confirm your date of birth on the back of the prescription form at the pharmacy, and the exemption applies from your 60th birthday onward, not before and not based on anything else. Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland already provide free prescriptions to everyone regardless of age. So this particular point mostly matters if you live in England, or you're used to different rules from elsewhere in the UK and assume they're the same everywhere. Take someone like Derek, just turned 60, still being charged at his usual pharmacy because the system hadn't updated his record after his birthday, came and went. That's worth querying on the spot, not assuming it's correct, because pharmacies do occasionally get it wrong, particularly if you've moved house or changed surgeries recently and the records haven't caught up. Next is NHS site tests, another one that's purely about age. No benefit required and no income question asked. Once you turn 60, a full NHS eye examination is free. No means test, no income check, just your date of birth given honestly at the desk. Conditions like glaucoma and cataracts develop slowly and often without obvious symptoms early on. So this is genuinely worth using every 2 years, even if your eyesight feels perfectly fine to you day to day. Most opticians apply the exemption automatically once you give your date of birth at booking, but it's worth mentioning your age when you book so there's no confusion at the till afterwards. And if a family history of glaucoma applies to you, mention that too, since it can sometimes mean more frequent free checks are available rather than the standard 2-year gap. We're roughly at the halfway point, so if you're finding this helpful, subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one. I cover this stuff in plain English, so you don't have to wade through 40 pages of gov.uk yourself. The fourth charge is the television licence, and this is where the honest catch really matters, because a lot of people get it wrong in both directions, and it's benefit-based, not purely age-based like the previous three. Free TV licences for the over 75s were withdrawn as a blanket entitlement a few years ago. They still exist, but only if you or your partner receive pension credit. Simply being 75 doesn't qualify you anymore on its own, and that single change catches out more people than almost anything else on this list, largely because the old rule is still what people remember hearing about years ago. Take someone like Harold, 76, who assumed the old rule still applied, and kept paying for the licence year after year without realising he could have claimed pension credit and had it covered entirely, simply because nobody had told him the rule had changed. Others assume the opposite, that they're automatically covered once they turn 75 and stop paying without checking first, which risks a licensing problem they never needed to create over a misunderstanding. If you're 75 or over and receiving pension credit, you apply through TV licensing directly with your pension credit award letter as proof, and the free license covers your whole household, not just you individually. If you're 75 and not currently on pension credit, it's worth checking whether you'd actually qualify, because that single benefit brings a good deal more with it than just the license, which we'll come back to shortly. Fifth is NHS dental charges, and this one trips people up in almost the opposite direction from the television license, because people assume it's about age when it plainly isn't. There's no automatic dental exemption simply for being over 60, 66 or any other age you care to name. What actually exempts you is receiving pension credit guarantee credit specifically, or a small number of other income-related benefits, and your partner's entitlement counts too if you're claiming as a couple rather than individually. So 2 people the same age, one on pension credit and one just above the threshold, can have completely different experiences sitting in the same dentist chair for the same treatment, one paying nothing and the other paying the full NHS band rate, which for anything beyond a simple checkup isn't small at all. NHS dental charges in England run across 3 bands depending on the treatment involved, and none of them are covered by age alone, only by the qualifying benefit. Take a couple like Joan and Peter, both 79, where Joan assumed her age alone would cover the charge and was genuinely surprised to be billed for a filling she thought would be free. If you think you might be entitled to pension credit and haven't claimed it, dental charges are one more reason it's worth checking properly rather than assuming you wouldn't qualify without ever actually running the numbers. It's also worth mentioning at your next appointment that you're checking your eligibility, since most dental practices are used to walking patients through exactly what they'd need to show at the desk once a claim comes through. The 6th is council tax, and there are 2 separate routes worth knowing, one about your household and one about your income. The first is the single person discount, which knocks 25% off your bill if you live alone. And this has nothing to do with age or income at all. It's purely about who else is counted as living in the property. Plenty of widowed pensioners are still paying full council tax years after their circumstances changed, simply because nobody told the council the household had shrunk to 1 person and the account was never updated. The second route is council tax reduction, sometimes called council tax support, which is means tested and run separately by each local council, so the exact amount varies depending on where you live and what your income and savings look like on paper. Some councils also offer additional discretionary reductions for pensioners in genuine financial hardship on top of the standard scheme, so it's worth asking specifically rather than assuming the standard calculation is the only option available to you. And if there's an adult child or a lodger living with you, that can change what you're entitled to as well, sometimes reducing a discount, sometimes opening up a different one. So it's genuinely worth a proper conversation with the council rather than guessing from memory of how it used to work. Take someone like Eileen, 74, widowed 3 years ago, and only just discovering during a chat with a neighbour that she'd been overpaying the whole time because the single person discount was never applied to her account after her husband passed away. Neither of these happens automatically. You have to apply through your local council's website or by phone, and most councils will only backdate a limited amount if your circumstances changed a while ago, so it's worth sorting sooner rather than assuming it'll be picked up eventually on its own. Here's the thread that runs through several of these, and it's the one thing worth understanding properly rather than just ticking boxes as you go. Pension credit is what's called a gateway benefit. A surprising number of pensioners who are entitled to it never claim it. often because they assume their savings or a small workplace pension puts them over the limit, when the actual calculation is more forgiving than people expect and takes housing costs and other circumstances into account rather than just looking at a headline income figure. Claiming pension credit, even a small amount, even just a few pounds a week, can open the door to the free TV license, help with dental charges, cold weather payments, the warm home discount toward your winter energy bill, and a stronger council tax reduction claim, on top of the pension credit payment itself. And that's the mistake worth flagging clearly. And it's the one I see most often. It isn't that these 6 exemptions are separate little quirks scattered around the system with no connection to each other. Several of them lead straight back to the same gateway. And missing that gateway is usually the real reason people end up paying charges they didn't have to, sometimes for years, without ever realising it was happening. So here's what to actually do with this. Start with the pension credit calculator on gov.uk. It takes about 10 minutes and gives you a realistic answer without committing you to anything or affecting any other benefit you already receive while you check. If it turns out you're entitled, claiming it can be done by phone or online through the pension service, and that single claim is worth checking even if you assume the answer will be no, because the eligibility calculation catches more people than most people expect it to. For prescriptions and eye tests, if you're over 60 and being charged, raise it with the pharmacy or optician directly. It's usually a quick fix sorted right there at the counter. For the television license, check your eligibility through TV licensing if you're 75 or over, or if you care for someone who is and manages their affairs. For council tax, contact your local council directly, both for the single person discount if it applies, and for council tax reduction if your income is limited. And ask specifically whether they can backdate it to when your circumstances actually changed, and if any of this feels like too much to untangle on your own. Citizens Advice and Money Helper offer free, impartial help with exactly this kind of thing, and PensionWise can talk you through anything pension-related without charging a penny for it. None of these services will try to sell you anything afterwards, which is worth knowing if you've been put off asking for help by pushy phone calls in the past. They exist specifically because so many people find the system confusing, and using them isn't a sign you've done anything wrong. It's simply the sensible way through paperwork that was never written with plain English in mind. To recap, national insurance stops at state pension age. Prescriptions and eye tests are free from 60 in England. The television licence and dental charges both depend on receiving pension credit rather than age alone. And council tax has 2 separate discounts worth checking: the single person discount and the means tested reduction. Underneath most of it sits pension credit, the benefit that brings several of the others along with it, and the one most worth 10 minutes of your time to check properly, even if you've assumed for years that you wouldn't qualify and never bothered looking. Or a relative told you not to bother because it wasn't worth the hassle. 6 charges, 6 checks, and quite possibly several £100s a year that never needed to leave your account in the first place. None of it requires anything dramatic, just 10 minutes with the right calculator, a birth certificate to hand, if payroll or the pharmacy ask for one, and a willingness to actually ask the question instead of assuming the answer. Thanks for watching to the end. If you found this helpful, share it with someone in the family who'd benefit. These rules matter most to the people who never hear about them. And do check the official links in the description before you act on anything. See you in the next one.